so that happened? I'm worried. His remains still have enough power to reach the imperial palace. It seems like you're in a hurry too. Judging by the fact that you haven't even tried to cover up the murder, the situation seems so serious that you can't even think clearly. While talking to Roderick about the current situation, Hiram ruffled his hair as if his mind was in a mess. I felt anxious, like something was going to happen at any moment, but I didn't know where to start or what to do. For now, we have to catch the woman who met Byron before we can start to find out. Given the lack of follow-up, there is a chance he may not return. Yes, I have spread the setup at every entrance to the palace, so if she comes and goes, they will catch her in no time. He sighed deeply and reproached himself with a worried expression. The administration was negligent. It's all my fault. Regretting what has already happened will not change anything, Your Majesty, Roderick said with an apathetic smile. Hey, aren't you too cold? I also brought a daughter of the heir family to my house with my own hands. I perfectly understand His Majesty's feelings, and I tell you so. Now is not the time to repent, but to look for a solution. We all make mistakes. When Hiram grumbled in a sad voice, Roderick laughed and cleared up his friend's misunderstanding. He was only offering clumsy comfort, but it seemed like the recent series of events had worn him down, and his tone had turned cynical. Yeah. This is not the time to get depressed. You're right. It was then that the Emperor clenched his fist again, trying to gather his strength. Your Majesty, I have something to report. A knock was heard outside the room, along with the investigator's voice. Happens. What's happening? The researcher, who entered the room after receiving permission, saw Roderick just before he opened his mouth and looked at the Emperor. It seemed that he was considering whether to report the matter publicly, given its top-secret nature. It's okay, just tell me. Yes, Your Majesty. We've caught her. The one who entered and left the prison using a maid's ID. We caught her when she was trying to leave through the main door of the palace. Hearing this pleasant news, Hiram and Roderick jumped to their feet. They wanted to question her as soon as possible to find out what she was up to. If they caught her leaving the main gate safely, it means she is qualified to enter and exit the palace, Hiram murmured as she hurried towards where she was being held. Yes, it's true. She showed me her ID, claiming to be a maid of the Crown Prince's palace. At first glance, it didn't look like a fake ID, but when the investigator, who heard the Emperor's soliloquy, responded like this, Roderick and Hiram, who were running in a hurry, stopped in their tracks. Because Isla and Winfred were there together. Say it again. A maid from the Crown Prince's palace. They started running towards the Crown Prince Palace without even listening to the investigator's words or saying who should go first. They hoped that nothing would happen and that this anxiety was just a worry. Hiram, in particular, was even more anxious. He was angry with himself for not knowing until now that such a dangerous person had hidden in his only son's space. Please, it's okay. I was just trying to have a good time with you. So why are you so tactlessly interrupting me? You can take your anger out on me, Dad. Hiram shuffled his feet, trying to contain his anxiety. However, their wishes were in vain, and the Crown Prince Palace was already in chaos, as if something had happened. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. What's happening? That is. Joseph, the Chamberlain, was about to send someone to tell Winfred what had happened, but he was so devastated that he could not open his mouth and remained silent. Then, in the midst of the commotion, Isla discovered Roderick and ran into his arms. Father. Isla, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Winfred. Isla began to explain this situation to Roderick with a trembling voice, but Hiram did not wait for her and headed towards his son's noisy bedroom. There Winfred lay, motionless, as if dead. Surrounded by royal wizards and a court doctor. He felt as if his breath were taken away as he watched that scene. He wanted to run and wake up his son, but Hiram stopped him with a gesture of his face. He knew that an excited guardian would only interfere with the treatment and not help. How did this happen? Your Majesty. It seems that he has been poisoned. We have not yet determined what type of poison was used. Under the furious majesty of the Emperor, the doctor explained the situation in a low voice, as if he was being crushed. To prevent the poison from spreading, he temporarily slowed his breathing and pulse with magic, but it was only a temporary measure. At the palace doctor's words that he had to quickly find out what poison he had consumed and detoxify him, Hiram staggered and collapsed in his chair. How much time can you buy? I think it would be about 24 hours maximum. 24 hours. Hearing that he had to rescue his son in such a short time, Hiram jumped to his feet. Make sure this never reaches the ears of the Empress. The first thing he did was shut up. Celine's health had deteriorated significantly lately. If she had heard the news, it would have been Celine, not Winfred, who was the first to walk away from the world in shock. Yes, Your Majesty. Before leaving the room, Hiram took one last look at his son. Every time she saw his pale face, her hands and feet trembled, and she felt like she was going to collapse at any moment, but she closed her eyes tightly and forced herself to continue walking. Roderick, let's go. At the Emperor's call, Roderick, who was trying to comfort his daughter, stopped following him and looked at Isla with a worried expression. Isla, you. I want to stay with Winfred. Roderick, who was about to say, go home to your mother first, looked at his daughter's face when she interrupted him. His stubbornly pursed lips and determined expression made it seem impossible to persuade him. Roderick sighed and let her stay in the palace. He was about to chase after Hiram, who had already gone ahead. Father. If you find any clues, please let me know. I'm not an expert, but I think it could help, Isla said. Roderick, who knew Byron had taught him toxicology, nodded after a moment's hesitation. Under the circumstances, it was decided that Isla, who knew both the poison and Byron's power, would be of great help. As Hiram and Roderick hurried out of the Crown Prince's palace and arrived at the guardhouse, the investigator greeted them with a bewildered expression. Welcome, Your Majesty. His Excellency, the Duke. Is there a problem? As the atmosphere seemed chaotic, Roderick cautiously asked on behalf of the Emperor, who was distraught over the Winfred matter. That's. The researcher began to speak incoherently, his voice breaking. When we caught her, her appearance clearly matched the witness's testimony. But then, suddenly, the color of his hair and eyes changed. Has your appearance changed? Have you checked his belongings? Oh, yes. I confiscated 2 suspicious vials. Here. In response to Roderick's question, the investigator took out a bottle of medicine that he had confiscated from the suspect and showed it to him. One side was a small glass jar with a clear, colorless liquid, and the other side was a jar with a thick greenish-brown liquid. It is a magic potion that changes the color of your eyes and hair, Your Majesty. Roderick opened the bottle with the brown liquid, sniffed it, and opened his mouth. He recognized it because he had seen it several times, since it was a drug that criminals often used to hide their identity. What were they trying to hide by changing their eye and hair color? Hiram tried to contain his anger and walked towards the cell where the maid was being held. Roderick stared at the remaining vial. If one contained a camouflage potion, the other was probably poison. Take this jar to the Crown Prince's palace. It is urgent, we must act immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. He handed the jar to the researcher and ran after his master. He briefly considered taking him himself, but felt it would be better to stay by Hiram's side, who was unsteady at the time. Even if it wasn't him, the item would probably be delivered safely as it was entrusted to the Emperor's secret researcher. And then, Roderick, who followed Hiram to the detention center, stopped dead when he saw the young woman locked up. He was left speechless as he saw a pair of golden eyes staring through the bars with a terrified face. "Your Majesty, what is this? It seems I have a niece I don't know." Hiram looked at the girl inside the cell with a slight smile. It was a situation that didn't seem funny, but seeing her so identical to Byron was so shocking that he couldn't help but laugh. "Is there still no contact from the pharmacy? It's been so long since I found the poison, and still no news?" "I apologize, Your Majesty. Since there are so many types of poisons, it will probably take a while for the test results to come back." The innocent subordinate trembled as he responded to Hiram's furious question. The normally kind and gentle emperor was now as cunning as a sharp-tongued porcupine. Of course, he understood how he felt, since it was a reasonable situation, but fear was a separate matter. Hiram slammed the table. Time was running out, and there was no way to detoxify the poison, much less find out what Winfred had consumed. Although she managed to obtain a confession from Byron's illegitimate daughter, whom she never knew existed, Binka, unfortunately, did not know the name of the poison she had used to harm the person. Capella Air, who gave him the poison, was already dead and no longer in this world. If only Cloud Air had woken up. Cloud should have known what poison his sister-in-law was carrying, but unfortunately, he still didn't regain consciousness. Hiram wiped his face desperately. There were only about 20 hours left. If he couldn't rescue Winfred in that time. His anxiety reached its limit, and he felt every last thread of reason he was clinging to slip away. He jumped out of his seat and headed towards where the mastermind behind all of this was being held. The guard guarding the prison asked with a bewildered expression, surprised by the Emperor's sudden visit. "Your Majesty, what is happening? Open the door." When the guard opened the door, Hiram lunged at the prisoner. Before Byron could even recognize the visitor, he pinned him against the wall and began to strangle him.